Good morning and welcome to another episode of Territories Talk. Today we are going to have a conversation about the friendly island of the Eastern Caribbean, also known as Sint Maarten, or SMX, depending on who you're talking to. And today we have a very special guest, someone who I know and admire for a long time, Mr. Xavier Blackman of St. Maarten and Sable. And I'm going to bring him to the stage now. Good day, Mr. Blackman.
Good morning. Good morning. Famous. How are you doing?
Or as they say in some of the islands, Kuntabai.
Kuntabai. Amita Bong Donkey.
Yeah, donkey, yes. Well, some people might think donkey means something else. How are you doing? How's St. Maarten today?
Good. It's a quiet and sunny day. So happy to be back and on your show again.
Yeah. A lot of people throughout the region, we hear about the big islands, Barbados, Trinidad, Jamaica, obviously. But a lot of the smaller islands get lost in the source that people don't know about. So one of the goals of Territories Talk has always been to highlight the story of the, for lack of a better term, the smaller islands, right? So I want to give a shout out to my co-host, Shayna Smith Archer, who you would know of the Virgin Islands, and speaker Shirley Osborne of Montserrat. Sorry. And I want to give a shout out to our media partners, Cayman Road, CBN Radio in the Virgin Islands, Channel 82 in Bermuda, Radio Turks and Caicos in Turks and Caicos Island, and Radio Montserrat in Montserrat. And I also think we have affiliation with Radio PJFE in Sable, Dave Levinstone, I want to say. So yes. So welcome. So tell us, who is Xavier Blackman?
Thank you. Well, to start off with your last point, Mr. Levinson is actually a second cousin of mine. So I was born on Saba, the unspoiled queen. At the age of 5, my mother took me to the Netherlands, where I lived for the following 22 years. I returned to Saba in 1995, and I lived and worked on Saba until 2007, and that's when I moved to Sint Maarten, where I've been living ever since, with short spells in Curacao, Aruba, Statia for work. I started off in the banking sector in the Netherlands. When I moved back to Saba, I started off actually at GB for a very short stint, the electricity company of the Windward Islands at the time. And then I moved over to government in Saba. And I was in different positions, initially as head of finance and economic affairs. And I was also the chief advisor to former Commissioner Will Johnson. After that, I had a brief stint during my time in Saba. I was also, for a short period, State Secretary of Finance in the federal government of the Netherlands Antilles at the time in Curacao. Then I moved back to Saba, and then in 2007, I got a position at KPMG Sint Maarten, and that's when I moved to Sint Maarten. At KPMG, I started off as associate director, and then in 2009, I was requested to take up the position of Commissioner of Finance in the then Sint Maarten government, which is currently the Minister of Finance. I did that for about a year and a half, and then I went back to the private sector as a individual consultant, and that's what I've been doing since, doing different jobs in the private and the public sector. And in 2019, I started advising the current Minister of Economic Affairs, Traffic and Transportation and Telecommunications of Sint Maarten, Honorable Grisha Heilige-Maarten. I started off advising her in her parliamentary role. She was also briefly President of Parliament. And then when she transitioned last year to the ministerial post, to the Council of Ministers, I went with her and advised her in a consultant capacity up to this day. I recently was appointed as special representative of the shareholder of the Economic Development Corporation of Sint Maarten. So I am currently now in that position besides my private enterprise endeavors.
Okay, sound like a very, very busy individual. Well, thank you for your service to the Dutch islands. Well, I shouldn't say Dutch island, the islands in the Caribbean who happen to have, um, how can I say, Dutch history, right? So today we're going to talk a little bit about St. Martin because a lot of people some have heard of St. Martin, some haven't, and today, with your
Correct.
depth of knowledge, you'll be able to give a little broader perspective of what St. Martin is about. So let's get started. And this is the flag. Tell us about this flag of St. Martin. Now, saying, tell us about the flag of St. Martin. Okay. Are you hearing me?
Yes, it was a little bit choppy, but I can hear you now again. Yes.
Yeah, sorry. That's the problem with being in the Caribbean. Our telecommunications isn't all that great. Now, saying, tell us a little bit about the flag of St. Martin.
Yes, what you're seeing now is the official, I would say, Dutch colonial flag of Sint Maarten. It represents the red, white, and blue, which is also in the Dutch flag. And then in the middle, or to the left, actually, is the coat of arms of Sint Maarten. There's also a unity flag, as you know, and most of your listeners would know, Sint Maarten was colonized both by the Dutch and French. So there is still a official boundary between the north, which represents the French, and the south, which represents the Dutch part of the island. But there's also a unity flag that represents the unity of both the north and the south. So, like I said, Sint Maarten was colonized by the French and the Dutch in the past, and it is still, to a certain extent, the case. It was used primarily for slave trade and plantation. It was a plantation-based economy. There are still some plantation, I would say, properties on the island. Some areas are still named after the owners of those plantations, or former owners, like the Plants family, etc. So in 1954, with the establishment of the Netherlands Antilles, the former Netherlands Antilles, as a country or constituent state within the Kingdom of the Netherlands, you then had the Netherlands proper, the Netherlands Antilles, and Suriname. So that constitutional structure was created in 1954. And that remained in place until 1975, when Suriname left that constellation, the 50th anniversary of the independence of Suriname. And then you have, in 1986, Aruba left the Netherlands Antilles and became a separate constituent country within the kingdom, the so-called status aparte. So that happened in 1986. And then the 5 remaining islands remained together until 2010, when the remains of the Netherlands Antilles were dismantled. The 3 islands, the smaller islands, so to speak, Bonaire, Sint Eustatius, and Saba, then became special overseas municipalities of the Netherlands. And the other islands, Sint Maarten and Curaçao, they achieved a status comparable to that of Aruba, which is a constituent country within the Kingdom of the Netherlands. So that is in a nutshell the history of the Netherlands Antilles and of Sint Maarten. So we are now, as an island, we are a constituent state within the Kingdom of the Netherlands.
All right. So for those of us that, man, most of the viewers are from English islands, right? When I say English, meaning British colonists, right? Rather the former colonists or present colonists. And could you explain the difference between constituent countries and special municipalities of the Netherlands?
Yes, a constituent country uh, is equal. It's almost equal to in the, well, I would say a constituent state. So the Netherlands is the country that is internationally recognized. The Kingdom of the Netherlands is the country that is internationally recognized with UN membership. Okay, so the Netherlands, Aruba, Sint Maarten, and Curacao are states within that structure, whereas the Netherlands is the only country that has, I would say, independence, whereas Aruba and Curacao and Sint Maarten do not. So they are technically not independent. They still fall under the Kingdom of the Netherlands as part of the Kingdom of the Netherlands. So they don't resort under the Netherlands proper, as opposed to Sint Eustatius, Saba, and Bonaire. They are, you could compare them to cities in the Netherlands, albeit overseas. So they have a status comparable to, for instance, Martinique and Guadeloupe, the overseas French municipalities or territories. So that is the difference between a constituent state and a overseas municipality.
Okay. So back to what, thank you for that explanation. Back to what you were saying earlier. This is what, tell us about this picture.
This picture represents what was once the largest industry in Sint Maarten, which is the salt industry. And technically speaking, Sint Maarten was initially named, and some people still refer to it currently as Sualiga, which means the land of salt. You still can see remnants of that industry in Sint Maarten, as you will know, having visited recently, where you have the Great Salt Pond. And the Great Salt Pond is in the center of the island. And that is where, in former days, the salt was reaped, was harvested, so to speak, and then exported. So Sint Maarten's economy was initially based on the salt industry. And there are still, like I said, remnants. There are still statutes that represent the salt pickers and the industry in those days.
Okay. And I see that there's a monument to the salt pickers.
Yes, correct. That is indeed a tribute to the salt pickers. That is a monument close to Philipsburg that represents Sint Maarten's past in terms of the salt industry.
Okay. So tell us a little bit about I would say the current culture of St. Martin, as far as what's the demographics, what's the size, so on and so forth.
Yes, St. Maarten is generally referred to as the 37 square mile island. In total, we look at the total island, the total territory. It has close to, estimates differ obviously, but between 60 to 80,000 inhabitants. Like I said, it's technically, officially a French territory, but historically have lived, harmoniously together. Some people live on the northern side and work on the southern side, and vice versa. So traditionally and historically, the culture has been basically one culture, with the exception that on the French, on the northern part, French is the official language, whereas English is widely spoken, and on the southern part, English is also widely spoken, whereas English and Dutch are the two official languages. Of course, due to the immigration, we also have a large, considerable Spanish community, a considerable Haitian community, and also communities or inhabitants from the neighboring English islands, British-speaking islands.
Yeah, because I was joking with somebody and I was looking at your current ministers, and I was like, "What's this? Is this St. Martin government or is this Anguilla government?" Because many of your ministers, their surnames indicate that they come from the, or not say they, but their family originated in Anguilla, and you have some who are from St. Kitts as well. We have MP Otley is definitively Caucasian. There's no question about that. So yeah, St. Martin is a very
Yes,
sorry, go ahead.
yes, you're right. It's a very cosmopolitan island, I would say, and indeed the links with Anguilla are there, and with the other neighboring islands. Like I said, I myself was born on Saba. My father was born in Aruba, and his father lived in Santo Domingo. And on my grandmother's side, my maternal grandmother was born in Anguilla. So I have roots, in Anguilla and probably in St. Kitts as well, Santo Domingo, Aruba, Curacao. So indeed, most people on the island have roots, throughout the Caribbean.
Mhm.
Our current prime minister has Curaçaolean roots. So indeed, very mixed population that obviously is also reflected in the.
All right. So tell us about the current economy of the current economy of St. Martin.
The current economy is, as you know, nobody will be surprised to hear that, based on tourism, has been since the 60s, I would say, um,
Mhm.
uh, in the process of being, uh, I would say, diversified. We have heard about diversification for years. The current government is really looking to, put that action plan into place, and not so much moving away completely. Tourists they want more of a local experience, as opposed to just flying to the island and lying on the beach and having dinner. They really want to have local experiences. So St. Martin is in the process of transitioning to that type of tourism model. There are also efforts to attract, I would say, digital nomads, so people who can work globally, digitally, remote, and that will make St. Martin their home or their office, so to speak.
Mhm.
So that is one of the objectives of the current government. And besides that, the government is also looking at expanding and really beefing up the agricultural sector. When I say agriculture, I also mean fisheries and animal husbandry. So there are many efforts in that respect. And speaking of our neighboring islands, including St. Kitts, last year there was a mission to St. Kitts. The current Minister of Economic Affairs, who parliamentary committee the government into giving agriculture a more prominent place, in where we looked at how St. Kitts deals with their agriculture, how they have expanded it, and how they have really made it into a very strong sector. We are currently in talks. When I say we, the government and the private sector on St. Martin are in talks with the government of St. Kitts to organize a follow-up visit where both sectors on both islands can exchange ideas on how, for instance, the trade between the islands can be improved. Because St. Kitts has a pretty considerable agriculture producing sector, and they have a lot of space to export, a lot of opportunities to export. St. Martin, on the other hand, is looking to really expand the agricultural sector from, basically backyard farming to really making it, expanding it to making it a real strong sector that can also contribute to or contribute more to the economic development of the island. So giving more opportunities for local farmers, getting more people into farming and agriculture in general, making it more sexy and attractive, for lack of a better word, for people to get into the agricultural sector, and to establish a sector that will contribute. We will never be, or at least not in our lifetimes, completely self-sufficient, but at least work towards more self-sufficiency when it comes to agriculture, and also establish more working relationships with agricultural organizations and governments in the region. As you know, there's a initiative to reduce the export. Is a 20 by 2025 initiative. We are already in 2025, so it's not clear yet if that objective will be reached, but the CARICOM has that objective to, I believe it is, reduce the dependence on agricultural imports to 25%, or at least be for 25% self-sufficient. So Sint Maarten fully supports that objective and that aim, and is working hard towards improving the contribution of the agricultural sector on Sint Maarten to the overall economy.
Okay, and tell us about your currency in St. Maarten.
Yes, we recently, so Sint Maarten and Curacao share one financial regulator, which is the Central Bank of Curacao and Sint Maarten. And earlier this year, the new official currency, the Dutch Caribbean Guilder, as to the Dutch Antillian Guilder, which was and still currently is partially used. So that new currency was introduced. I think up until the end of July, the notes can still be exchanged, but after that, the new official currency will be the Dutch Caribbean Guild. And again, that's a currency that is shared between Curacao and Sint Maarten. Aruba has its own currency, the Aruban florin, and the three Dutch overseas municipalities, they use the US dollar as the official currency. Interestingly, the US dollar is widely used on Sint Maarten, particularly on the southern part. And on the northern part, the euro is the official currency. So you see there again, there's a mix of currencies. So you will have the euro on the northern side, the dollar on both sides being used, and then as of this year also the newly established Dutch Caribbean Guilder for the official currency on the southern Dutch part of Sint Maarten.
What is the exchange rate of the U.S. dollar to the Caribbean Guilder?
The exchange rate is 1.8, and that has remained. That dollar peg has remained. So for each US dollar, you will get 1.8 Dutch Caribbean Guilder. That has remained the same.
All right. So tell us about this picture.
That picture is the border monument. So to the right of that picture is the northern part, the official Dutch part of the island, and to the left is the southern part, the Dutch part, where you will see the Sint Maarten flag and the Dutch flag, and to the right you will see the French flag, the European French flag. Now, the border might sound a little bit misleading for those who haven't been to Sint Maarten. It's technically speaking, there's no physical border. There's a monument which will show when you cross that, I would say, invisible border. But you wouldn't notice it if you're not aware of it. Like I said, people drive back and forth. There's no border control, anything like that. So you drive back and forth. There are two other areas where you can cross the border. There is one in Dutch Quarter where there's a similar monument. Again, you just drive past it. Tourists will stop to take a picture, but you just drive past it and then you traverse the border from the north to the south, or or vice versa. So that is the official monument where every year on the 14th of July and on Sint Maarten Day, there is a brief official ceremony, including officials from both the northern and the southern part of the island.
Mm-hmm. So the signage changes, like when you're on the Dutch side, the signage will be in Dutch and English, and then when you're in French, is in French and English, or is there any, the signage remains the same?
Yes, so the road signs are pretty universal, obviously, the traffic signs, but you will indeed see the signage on the northern part is French, the indications, and on the southern part are Dutch and English, I might say. A lot of the street names on the southern part are still Dutch, like Houtsteeg, Oranjesteeg, and those kind of names. But indeed, the signage is different on both sides of the island. But like I said, both populations move around on both sides of the island, so that has never really been an issue.
So what's the sort of, I guess you'll say, the cost of living like in St. Maarten? Is there a challenge with the cost of living in St. Maarten?
Yes, I would high. Uh, the what you see historically is that the Dutch Caribbean islands have historically been, I would say, an oasis of relative wealth compared to the surrounding islands. The British speak the British islands, English-speaking islands, have always looked at the Dutch islands as increase their standard of living. That is partially due to the fact that due to the Dutch influence. So it was always, I would say, artificially higher than the surrounding islands in terms of the standard of living, and that also means the cost of living. What you see is, in general, with island economies, which are dependent on, to a large extent, on imports, the cost of living is relatively high when islands are smaller than when they are bigger. If you compare, for instance, Curacao with Sint Maarten, the cost of living is much lower. You can almost say that what on Sint Maarten is priced in US dollars is priced in Dutch Caribbean guilders on Curacao. So that kind of gives you an idea. So that's almost 1.8 times more expensive. Generally, the rule of thumb is, if, for instance, you would purchase a house on Sint Maarten that is, let's say, 100,000 US dollar, you would be able to purchase a comparable house in Curacao for 100,000 Dutch Caribbean guilders or Antillean guilders previously. That discrepancy has changed a little bit, but for years that was kind of the comparison. So yes, the cost of living is on Sint Maarten is relatively high, and that has been an issue. I would say even more since the COVID crisis, and now whenever there's a economic shock worldwide, rising oil prices or tariffs being increased globally, that obviously affects Sint Maarten to a large extent.
Okay. Tell us about this iconic, not just the location, but the airline.
Sorry, I lost you there for a second. What was your question?
No, sorry. Say, tell us about this iconic shot with the location and the airline.
Yes, that is indeed an iconic shot. It depicts the world famous Maho Beach, which is kind of a mecca for aviation enthusiasts around the world, because it's the beach is right next to the threshold of the airport runway. Of one of the runways, there's one runway, but of course they take off from both sides. And the plane landing in that shot is Sint Maarten's very own Windward Island Airways. Windward Island Airways serves the initially served the three islands, Seba, Statia, and Sint Maarten, and Sint Barts as well. But recently, the last 2 years, it has 2 or 3 years actually, it has expanded its network to Aruba, Curacao, and also Dominica, Martinique, Barbados, St. Vincent, and the Grenadines. So Winair has purchased a number of larger planes in the last 3 years, larger ATR turboprop planes to be able to serve a wider part of the Caribbean region. They also fly to the BVI, which is very convenient for a lot of travelers in the region. Antigua, like I said, Dominica. So the route network has expanded significantly the last 3 years. We also are served, obviously, by international airlines, American, KLM, Caribbean Airlines, and the likes, Air France from Europe. But that iconic shot is indeed iconic because it kind of captures I would say, the aviation and tourism spirit of St. Maarten. Maho Beach, Winair landing, and the obviously blue waters and blue skies.
Okay. Yeah, because I was trying to put up a video where you actually have tourists standing on that beach. The planes are flying in overhead, and when planes are taking off, the jet blast. Some people actually get, I don't want to say blown away, but they get moved a little bit. But another time I'll show that video.
Yes, that is one of the thrills of, like I said, aviation enthusiasts and in general tourists. To get a little bit of that jet blast. So especially on Sunday afternoons when the big jets take off, the beach is packed. That picture is the beach is pretty empty, but indeed there's a lot of videos online where you can see a packed beach and people enjoying the thrill of the jet blast, the dangerous thrill of the jet blast, I might add, because there are signs there warning people against it because it can be hazardous to your health.
Yeah. So let's make a little transition and talk a little bit about the local politics of St. Maarten. Tell us how on island, how is the parliament set up? Sorry, could you hear me?
Yes, it was a little bit jittery, but I understood you wanted to transition to the local politics.
Yes. So tell us a little bit about that. You're quite knowledgeable on that.
Yes, in Maarten politics, the first and most important thing I think to mention is that unlike the neighboring countries and islands, St. Maarten, as of 2010, when it became a constituent country within the Kingdom of the Netherlands, has switched from a monistic political system to a dualistic political system. What you see in most of the other territories, there's a monistic system where members of parliament are also members of the cabinet, of the Council of Ministers. That was the case in St. Maarten and all the other Dutch Caribbean islands up until October 10, 2010. And with the implementation of the new political system, we switched to a dualistic system, which means that political office holders cannot be both in the legislative and the executive branch at the same time. So what happens is that the parliamentarians are elected during the general elections. Once they are elected, they take up their seat in parliament. And if they decide to take up a seat in the cabinet, so in the executive branch, they have to relinquish their seat in the legislative branch. So it's either or. And that is a big difference with the surrounding islands. So the St. Maarten Parliament Council of Ministers consists of seven ministers, headed by a prime minister. So that's a big difference, compared to mainly the English.
Okay, we're having a little bit of technical challenges. Sorry. Sorry, you dropped out for a minute,
Sorry,
Mr.
yes, I
Blackman.
think I was just.
So what? Why?
Yes.
What is?
What I was saying is that due to the switch from a monistic to.
Sorry, you're breaking up. Sorry, go
Yes,
ahead.
can
You
you
were
hear me?
breaking up. Yeah, I can hear you.
Yes. What I was saying is that due to the switch, or as a result of the switch from a monistic to a dualistic system, what you have seen in Sint Maarten, particularly, is that governments become more unstable because, unlike on the British Islands, when you are in Parliament, you are also in the executive branch, so you are responsible for both seats. Right? In the Sint Maarten situation, you have to give up one of those seats. So once you give up your seat in the legislative branch to take up your seat in the executive branch, you now do not control the fate of your seat in the executive branch, right? So you can't, for lack of a better word, protect your own seat. And that has caused a lot of instability. For instance, just last year alone, in Sint Maarten, there were two elections because right after the
Elections in 1 year.
government was in, yes, two elections, because there were elections in January. By the time the government was formed, because remember, parliamentarians have to give up their seat and take up a seat in the executive branch, and then somebody else has to take up their seat in the legislative branch. So that takes time before the government was formed. And then by the time the government was formed in May, I think it was 3 or 4 weeks in, one of the coalition parliamentarians switched sides to the opposition. And by doing so, the government collapsed. So we had to go back to the polls in August of last year and go through that whole cycle again. I'm saying this to say that before 2010, when Sint Maarten and all the other islands had a monistic system where you could have your seat in the legislative branch and the executive branch, governments never fell because it's, why would you, if you are in the legislative branch, why would you, fire yourself in the executive branch because you hold both seats, right? So governments never fell, very seldom, before 2010. And you see that after 2010, when the dualistic system was introduced, Sint Maarten and Curaçao, to a certain extent, have had many governmental changes, which, of course, are not conducive to a constructive and long-term government policy. When you have new ministers coming in every 1 or 2 years or 3 years, and governments not sitting out their full 4-year term. So that has been a challenge politically for Sint Maarten, I must say. But we work with it as good as we can.
So nowhere along the line has anyone says we need to go back to how we was before.
There have been voices to I personally, as advisor to former parliamentarian Grisha Heilige-Martin and current minister, have had many discussions about that with her. She has had discussions with others as well about it. But it would take a lot of legislative change. And the other thing that I failed to mention is that although Sint Maarten is a constituent country within the Netherlands, the country of the Netherlands proper still has the final say on many of the decisions. For instance, the budget, once approved by the Sint Maarten Parliament, still has to be both approved by a committee installed by the Dutch government, and then it has to be approved by the Dutch Kingdom Council of Ministers. So that is one remnant of Sint Maarten's colonial history. And secondly, speaking about monism, even if the Sint Maarten Parliament would decide to go back to a monistic system, it would still require approval, ultimate approval by the Dutch government and Parliament and Kingdom of Council of Ministers. And obviously, they were the ones actually who, I would say, almost forced the Dutch islands to switch to a dualistic system leading up to 10-10-10. So I doubt that they would agree to switching back to the monistic system. But that is something that I think personally needs to be looked at, because I don't think you can have stability in small island communities like ours with a dualistic system, how it functions at this.
All right. So that this picture here is outside of the Parliament of St. Maarten. Sorry, you're freezing up, Mr. Blackman.
Yes,
so the picture,
correct. That is the legislative, the building of the Parliament, which includes the offices and the
and this is the actual Parliament chamber. And this is the Parliament chamber.
Yes, that is the legislative hall with the chair and the Secretary General.
Okay. Cool. Yeah, I don't know. I guess that's just me. I have this thought process that if the colonizer is suggesting something, it's not good. Anything the colonizer suggests is not good, because what you clearly have seen is that over the years you've had governments collapses. It leads to unstable island governance, and it's not good for the people. People have lack of faith in parliamentarians. You're not effectively able to carry out mandates, get things done for the people, road repairs, affordable housing. Every time you look, you're chopping and changing. And somewhere along the line, you have to ask yourself, well, was this their plan for us to have an unstable government? Because that's what it comes across as. And who's this gentleman?
Yes, I think that that is our current Prime Minister, Dr. Luc Mercelina.
Yeah.
No, that's a very good point you make. I was privileged to be involved in the negotiations and the technical discussions and working groups leading up to 2010 and the dismantling of the Netherlands Antilles. And it was indeed the Dutch government and representatives who were pushing for this switch to dualism, because they said, it increases the level of democracy. But just like with a lot of other models that we, just copy from the Dutch or the European continental countries, they don't always work in our communities. And the switch to dualism is a case in point. And as a matter of fact, I've had many discussions with my former colleagues in the Netherlands when they visit the islands, and they would say, man, Xavier, the government fell again. And I always tell them, well, this is what we've been warning you against. This is what you guys wanted. I'm not sure if this was deliberately done, but we did tell them, the island delegations told them back at the time that having dualism is not going to work in these communities. And it doesn't need to work in these communities because, like I said before, the surrounding islands all have monistic systems. So I'm not sure why they did it or why they insisted on it, but this is the result.
Yeah, and the thing is, let's just say hypothetically they started off with the best of intentions, right? Let's say hypothetically. Let's give them benefit of the doubt. The reality is it's not working out. If you could have two general elections in 1 year, that's chaos, right? I'm not saying other islands are better governed or whatever, but having your electorate go back to the polls within 1 year because somebody decided to switch sides, that's kind of crazy, right? And I would say that you all should strongly advocate for a modification because you can continue to have these problems. Anyway, tell us about this lady.
Economy, Transportation, Tourism, and Traffic Minister of Sint Maarten. She's actually, when she was in Parliament, she introduced and got a motion passed that called on all those within the kingdom to finalize, and particularly the Dutch government, to complete the full decolonization process for the Dutch Caribbean islands. She also, during her tenure in Parliament, got a parliamentary committee, a permanent committee for agriculture established. So that is now established and in place and functioning. And now in the legislative branch, because she's one of those that had to give up her seat in Parliament to take up a seat in the executive branch. In the executive branch as minister, charged with, among others, agriculture, she's now able to, capitalize on having set up that committee for agriculture and getting, the agriculture sector in Sint Maarten, getting it up and running, or at least improving on its function.
This is her meet.
This is our visit. The Honorable Evelyn, Minister Evelyn of Nevis. We were in Nevis and St. Kitts last year. That's Minister Heilige Martin to the right. We paid a visit to St. Kitts and Nevis, and this was in Nevis where we had facilities. Very impressive. I'm an island the size can do and can produce in terms of agricultural produce. So this was in July of last year.
Okay. All right. Tell us about this.
This is also a very encouraging picture, I must say. To the left is my longtime friend and former boss, Councilman Clyde van Putten. I worked closely with him over the years, going back from 2011. In the middle is our current, Sint Maarten's current Speaker of the House, Honorable Sarah Westcott Williams, a longtime political veteran in Sint Maarten politics. And to the right is my country or island countryman from Saba, Vito Charles, a very young and bright politician. He's island council member. And this occasion was when a long-standing plan to establish a Windward Island Economic Union was revamped and picked up again. This was a recent picture, I think it was last month or the month before, where the island councils, so the island councils of Saba and St. Eustatius, met with the Parliament of Sint Maarten to revisit previous initiatives to establish a Windward Island Economic Union, where the three islands would collaborate more closely in establishing trade and investment ties and political ties among the three of them.
Yeah, so interesting. Is the gentleman, Mr. Charles, is what is the island? Is he what is his title in Saba?
He's island council member, so he's basically a parliamentarian in Saba, as is Mr. Van Putten.
So what is he to? I want to say Christina Charles.
He is Christina Charles' nephew.
Okay.
His father was the late Samuel Charles, who was one of the few local Saban policemen who was unfortunately killed in the line of duty in 1989. Sorry. And Vito Charles is his son, and he is currently an island council member in Saba.
Yeah, because the interesting thing about small island relations is that Mr. Charles is, you said his cousin. Christina is his cousin or his aunt?
His aunt, yes. Christina is the sister of his late father. Yeah.
Right. So Christina is married to my cousin Erdley in St. Eustatius, Erdley Woodley, and the gentleman to the left,
Yes.
Clyde Van Potten, is a longtime family friend of my family in Statia, and is also, I consider him one of my mentors as well, and is a strong advocate for the sovereignty of not just St. Eustatius but all the Caribbean islands, and he's the one that's always advocated for unity amongst the islands. So when I saw this picture, I was very happy to actually see this coming about. Yeah. So tell us about. There's another picture. 1 minute. And then there was some recent activity between St. Maarten and BVI, correct? There was a recent connection between St. Maarten and the British Virgin Islands. Are you hearing me? Can you hear me? Mr. Blackman, can you hear me? All right. So are you hearing me, Mr. Martin? Hello? Are you? Seems we're having a little. My apologies to the viewers. It seems we're having a little technical difficulties. Are you hearing me, Mr. Blackman? Hello? All right, can you hear me? Mr.
I
Blackman,
can hear you, but it was breaking up. But I think I got the gist of what you were saying in terms of the family ties and relationships between the islands and Asians.
Yeah, I was saying I was asking that there was a recent connection between St. Maarten and the British Virgin Islands, correct? Hello?
Could you repeat that last part?
No, I said there was a recent connection between St. Maarten and the British
Could you
Virgin
repeat that
Islands.
last part about the BVI and Sint Maarten?
Right. I was saying that there was a recent meeting between the governments of St. Maarten.
Yes, indeed. There's a MOU being established for both territories to work closely together. So that is also very encouraging.
Okay. When did this meeting take place?
I believe it was, I myself was off island, but I believe it was in the beginning of May or late April.
Okay. Yeah. So tell us a little bit about this picture.
Yes, that picture is the delegation consisting of the premier of the BVI, our Prime Minister, Luc Messelina, and then also our Minister of Economic Affairs, Honorable Grisha Heiliger Martin, and her staff, staff from the Economic Affairs Department, and the Premier from the BVI with his delegation. The agreement was to establish a MOU to increase the collaboration between both territories. A very important step, I believe. Specifically, or especially seeing that Winair now has direct flights to the BVI from Sint Maarten, so we can do a lot of business with the BVI, a lot of collaboration with the BVI. We can learn a lot from them, and they can learn a lot from us. Currently, the BVI is looking to transition from the financial services sector more towards tourism. So that is something that Sint Maarten can definitely assist the BVI with, and vice versa. The BVI can assist Sint Maarten with, information and experiences related to other sectors that Sint Maarten would like to diversify into.
Okay. So, as we close up, what would be your message to the people of Sint Maarten? Hello? Can you hear me?
Sorry, could you repeat that last part?
No, I said, as we close up, what would be your message to the people of Sint Maarten?
My main message would be to take pay very close attention to global developments, particularly global geopolitical developments, the shifts in geopolitical relationships, and prepare for a new world order, where instead of just looking to the US and Europe, we need to start looking at South America, the African continent, and what I like to call Western Asia, what usually is referred to as the Middle East. There's a lot of opportunities, and that is where the global developments are leading. So I would encourage everybody to follow those developments and prepare and open your minds towards a different world order in terms of who we do business with, who we trade with, where we get our tourism from, our tourists from, etc.
All right. Well, thank you, Mr. Blackman, for once again coming on the show. We look forward to having more people from Sint Maarten, Statia, and Saba to talk about what's going on in those islands. And I want to just, again, give a shout out to my co-host, Shana Smith Archer of Virgin Islands, and Speaker Shirley Osborne of Montserrat. Thank you for all that you do. Thank you to our media partners, Cayman Marwood and Cayman Islands, who's now launching their own TV station, Radio Turks and Caicos, Radio Montserrat, Channel 82 in Bermuda, and CBC Radio in Barbados, and Radio PJFE in Saba. Thank you.
Thank you for having me on, and to all the listeners and viewers and partners. It was a pleasure, and I shout out also to Shana. I haven't seen her in a while, but I hope to connect with her next time when I'm in the BVI.
Yeah, and when you see the when will you see the Minister Grisha Martin again, Heiliger Martin again?
Probably tomorrow.
All right. Well, give her my regards, and I see why I see exactly why she's getting.
I'll definitely do that.
And I see exactly why she's getting so much stuff accomplished for the people of Sint Maarten. Thank you for having her back.
No problem. My pleasure.
All right, my brother. We'll talk. Thank you all, and look forward to another episode of Territories Talk sometime later on this week, where we bring you somebody from another island to talk about what's going on in those islands. Thank you.